Every door she knocked on was slammed in her face. Employers laughed at her, friends abandoned her. Even family began to doubt her dreams. But one night, standing in front of a mysterious mansion on Lagos Island, she hesitated to knock, unaware that behind those glass walls lived a billionaire who could change her destiny forever. This is not just a story of wealth and power. It is a story of betrayal, resilience, love, and the one door she never tried, until fate forced it open. Sometimes, the doors we are afraid to knock on are the very ones holding our destiny. The streets of Lagos had a way of swallowing dreams whole. In the bustling city, where neon lights clashed with the dim glow of kerosene lanterns, Adanna Chukwuma walked with weary steps. She was only 24, a gifted young woman from Aba, with a mind sharp enough to cut through steel. Yet Lagos had reduced her to nothing but another face in the endless crowd of dreamers. Her days had become a cycle of rejection. Every morning she dressed neatly, her CV clutched like a lifeline. She knocked on doors, tech startups, glossy fashion houses, towering corporate offices, but each time the answer was the same. "We're sorry, you're not what we're looking for." Some didn't even bother to say sorry. Some didn't even look up from their desks before dismissing her. Adanna's confidence fractured with each no. Too ambitious for the small roles, too inexperienced for the big ones. That was how they described her. But how could she gain experience when no one would give her a chance? Lagos demanded proof before offering opportunity, yet refused to provide the stage for such proof. Each rejection hit harder because of the voices waiting back home in Aba. Her younger siblings called every evening, asking for school fees. Her mother's voice trembled on the phone, concealing the worsening cough that had begun to rattle her chest. Her father was gone, and Adanna had become the family's only hope. Lagos was meant to be the land where she rose high enough to lift them out of poverty. Instead, it was crushing her under the weight of unfulfilled promises. That night, the city's pulse beat differently. The traffic on Victoria Island was thinning, and a humid wind carried with it the smell of roasted corn and salt from the Atlantic. Adanna, exhausted and unsure of where else to go, wandered down a street she had never taken before. The air was quieter here, the chaos of Lagos strangely muted. It was a neighborhood of wealth, the kind of wealth that seemed unreal, the kind most people only saw in glossy magazines or Instagram feeds. She stopped suddenly. Before her rose a mansion unlike anything she had ever seen. Its walls were glass, towering into the night like a jewel box lit from within. Each floor glowed with warm, golden light, and shadows moved gracefully behind tinted windows, as though lives far removed from hers played out inside. The gate was high, guarded, intimidating, its design sleek, futuristic, whispering of money beyond comprehension. Adanna froze. There was something about the house, something magnetic. It seemed alive, humming with secrets. Her heart pounded, and she felt a strange pull, as though the mansion itself was daring her to step closer, to place her hand on the cold metal of the gate, to knock and demand that destiny open up. But fear was a heavy weight on her chest. She thought of her rejections, her failures, the laughter of employers who had dismissed her. What chance did she stand here before a palace that seemed built for gods, not mortals? She shook her head and whispered into the night, her voice breaking, "Not this one. Not tonight." She turned away, her shadow stretching long behind her as she walked. She didn't notice that on the third floor, hidden by tinted glass, a figure had been watching her the entire time. His gaze was sharp, curious, almost calculating. He had seen hundreds of faces pass his gate, yet something about hers made him pause. Something in her posture, the quiet defeat in her walk, the way she stared at the mansion, as if it held the answers to questions she dared not ask. Something about her unsettled him. From the balcony, he leaned forward slightly, his eyes following her until she disappeared into the darkness of the street. The world saw him as untouchable, inaccessible, a fortress of wealth and power. Yet tonight he felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, interest. Adanna, unaware, walked on. Her mind raced with thoughts of home, of hunger, of the unending spiral of rejection. She had no idea that the path she had just taken would be remembered for the rest of her life. That the glass-walled mansion she feared to approach was not just another closed door, but the very door she had been waiting for all along. The night swallowed her figure. The mansion loomed silently behind her, its lights glowing like a watchful eye, its secrets intact, for now. Somewhere behind that glass, unseen eyes were watching her. Who was he, and why did she feel destiny was locked inside that house? Behind that glass mansion lived a man Lagos gossiped about, but rarely saw. Obinna Umeh was a man Lagos could not stop talking about, yet almost no one truly knew. His name carried weight in the corridors of power, whispered in luxury boardrooms from Abuja to Dubai, printed in bold on the covers of glossy business magazines. He was 42, tall, with a presence that seemed to silence entire rooms. The world knew him as the CEO of Lumina Group, Africa's most powerful tech conglomerate. Lumina was more than a company. It was a revolution. Its fintech applications had brought banking to villages once forgotten, allowing market women in Owerri to send and receive money with a swipe. Its solar-powered smart city projects dotted Ghana, Rwanda, and Nigeria, turning deserts into living communities. Its real estate arm had redesigned skylines in Lagos and Accra, with glass towers that reflected the future itself. To millions, Lumina was hope. To Obinna, it was armor, the fortress he had built against the chaos of betrayal. For though his empire glittered, his heart lived in shadows. Wealth had come early, but so had treachery. Years ago, Obinna had trusted a man he called brother, his closest partner. Together, they had dreamed of building Africa's first truly global tech dynasty. But greed is a slow poison. That partner sold secrets to foreign competitors, stripping Obinna of billions overnight and shattering the foundation of his trust. The financial wound healed. Lumina rose stronger from the ashes. But the emotional scar remained. The betrayal cost him not just money, but love. His marriage collapsed in the wake of it all. His wife, weary of his obsession with rebuilding, walked out and never returned. Since then, Obinna had sealed himself in an unbreakable vault of silence, letting no one close, letting nothing personal threaten his empire again. Lagos called him cold, ruthless, impossible to approach. And perhaps they were right. He had become an island, a man surrounded by luxury yet untouched by life. Yet inside his mansion, Obinna kept a secret. Late at night, when the city finally grew quiet, he would sit by his glass walls with a sketchbook and a pencil, drawing lines and curves that no one would ever see. He designed cities that blended art and science, homes shaped like poetry, towers that curved like waves. In another life, he might have been an architect, but in this life, sketches were the only way he allowed himself to dream without risk. It was on one such night, with a glass of red wine untouched beside him and a half-finished sketch of a futuristic bridge before him, that he noticed her. Through the tinted glass of his mansion's third floor, he saw a young woman standing at his gate. She was not like the usual passers-by. Most who paused before his estate did so to take photographs, to marvel at the scale of his wealth. But this one stood differently, still, hesitant, almost reverent. Her shoulders slumped as though the weight of the world pressed down on her. Her eyes held not greed, but longing. Obinna leaned forward, curiosity stirring inside him like a ripple across still water. He studied her quietly, unseen. Her clothes were simple, but neat, her shoes worn but polished. In her hand, she clutched a folder, papers, perhaps dreams. He watched as she seemed to gather courage, take a step closer, then falter. Her lips moved. He could not hear the words, but he read them on her mouth. Not this one. Not tonight. She turned and walked away. Obinna remained at the glass wall long after she vanished into the Lagos night. It should have meant nothing. He had seen countless faces. He had taught himself never to care. But something about her unsettled him. Something in her hesitation mirrored his own hidden fears. The fear of opening doors, of trusting, of risking again. The Next morning, as his household staff went about their routine, he issued an order unlike any he had given in years. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed an unusual flicker of interest. "Find out who she is." The staff exchanged puzzled glances. Obinna Umeh never asked about strangers. He never noticed them. Yet now, for reasons even he could not explain, he needed to know her name, her story, her reason for stopping at his gate. The billionaire who trusted no one, who built walls of glass to keep the world out, had allowed a single unknown girl to slip through his defenses, not with force, but with silence. Why would a man who trusts no one suddenly care about a stranger? Adanna believed failure was now her shadow. The days bled into one another, and for Adanna Chukwuma, each day felt like a punishment. Lagos was supposed to be a city of opportunity, but for her, it had become a graveyard of collapsed dreams. She woke early, dressed carefully, and carried her CV like a shield. Yet every interview ended the same way, her words barely out of her mouth before the interviewer waved her away. Sometimes they dismissed her politely. Sometimes they didn't even bother to hide the smirk. "Too ambitious for the role," one said. "Not enough experience," another muttered. And sometimes the verdict was silent. A raised eyebrow, a shake of the head, a door closing before she had even sat down. She tried to pivot, to take control of her fate. With the little savings she had scraped together, she launched a small online boutique. She uploaded her sketches, transforming them into bold digital ads. For a week, hope flickered. Friends shared the page, a few strangers clicked, but orders never came. Without capital for production, the dream fizzled out before it began. Another door closed. Meanwhile, Lagos life pressed its weight on her. The daily chaos never let her breathe. Hours wasted in traffic, her bus stuck in a sea of honking horns and impatient drivers. PHCN blackouts plunged her room into darkness night after night, forcing her to fan herself with cardboard just to sleep. Generators roared in the distance, mocking her inability to afford one. The air itself seemed thick with heat, noise, and despair. The sharpest blade of all was her rent. The building she lived in leaned on the edge of collapse, its walls peeling, its pipes leaking. Yet the landlady, Mama Onome, was relentless. She stood at Adanna's door one evening, wrapper tied tightly across her chest, face hardened. "Madam," she barked, "if I no see my money by next week, pack your load. This house no be charity." Adanna swallowed hard, nodding silently. She wanted to scream, to explain that she was trying, that she was fighting every day for survival. But words caught in her throat. She simply watched Mama Onome walk away, the sound of her slippers slapping against the corridor echoing like a countdown. That night, she lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling fan that refused to turn because NEPA had taken light again. She held her phone close, scrolling through her failed boutique page, rereading rejection emails, replaying every no she had endured. And then, suddenly, her phone buzzed. A message appeared. "Your talent is wasted. You deserve more." Adanna froze. Her heart quickened. Who would send such a message? She didn't recognize the number. Her first thought was scam. Lagos was full of con artists, weaving words to lure the desperate. She locked her phone and turned away. Sleep came fitfully, broken by dreams of closed doors and faceless interviewers. The following evening, just as she returned from another fruitless walk across Victoria Island, her phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. "Come to Lumina Tower. Tomorrow. 8 a.m. Don't be late." Her phone slipped from her hand, clattering against the floor. She stared at it as though it had grown fangs. Lumina Tower? The headquarters of Africa's most powerful tech empire. That was no place for her. Why would anyone there know her name, much less invite her? She tried to dismiss it as a prank, yet unease settled in her stomach. The words felt different. They weren't written like a scammer's bait. They were direct, commanding, personal. Panic clawed at her chest. She paced her room, torn between disbelief and a strange spark of possibility. Could it be real? And if it was, what did they want from her? Her phone rang. It was her mother. The familiar voice from Abba calmed her racing heart. She confessed the messages, her suspicion, her fear of humiliation. Her mother went silent for a moment, before replying in her soft, steady tone. Adanna, my daughter, maybe this is the door God was keeping closed until the right one opened. You have knocked on many, but perhaps you were never meant to enter those. Go. See where this one leads. Adanna sat on her bed long after the call ended, her mother's words ringing in her ears. She thought of her siblings, of school fees unpaid, of nights filled with hunger. She thought of the glass-walled mansion she had seen, the one she had walked away from. What if the messages were connected? The next morning, the Lagos sun rose heavy with humidity, painting the sky in shades of orange and gray. Adanna stood at the foot of Lumina Tower. The building was a marvel of glass and steel, its sharp edges slicing into the sky, its very presence declaring power. She clutched her folder to her chest. Sweat gathered on her palms. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared passers-by could hear it. She stared at the revolving glass doors, the security guards in immaculate uniforms, the polished marble floors beyond. Her legs trembled, her breath caught. She had come this far, but could she step inside? Adanna stood before Lumina Tower, hands trembling. Will she enter? In a single morning, her world shifted from hopelessness to bewildering possibility. Adanna's legs carried her forward, though her spirit hesitated with every step. The glass doors of Lumina Tower opened automatically, swallowing her into a world she had never imagined. The air inside was cool, perfumed faintly with citrus and steel. Everything shimmered, floors polished like mirrors, walls glowing with digital art that shifted as she passed. One moment a rainforest in Congo, the next a night skyline of Nairobi. She blinked at the sight of robots gliding across the lobby, carrying trays of coffee, greeting clients with soft, mechanical voices. A massive screen above displayed words that felt directed at her alone. The future is African. The future is now. Her shoes clicked softly against the marble as a tall man in a crisp suit approached. Without introducing himself, he scanned her briefly, then said, "Follow me." His tone allowed no argument. Elevators whisked her upward, so fast her stomach tightened. Floor after floor blurred past, until the doors slid open to reveal a private corridor lined with glass panels, sunlight pouring in from every direction. The silence here was thick, almost sacred. The man led her to a set of doors that parted smoothly, revealing the penthouse. Adanna's breath caught. The space looked less like an office and more like a sanctuary of power. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls revealed the Atlantic Ocean stretching endlessly, waves shimmering under the morning sun. Minimalist furniture sat on marble floors, every piece sharp, precise, intentional. At the far end of the room, seated before a desk carved from black granite, was the man himself, Obinna Umeh. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment the room seemed to grow heavier. His presence was overwhelming. Tall, broad-shouldered, his dark suit tailored to perfection. His eyes were sharp, assessing, as if he could read entire histories in a single glance. He did not smile. Adanna lowered her gaze, her palms damp with sweat. She had imagined this moment in so many ways, but now that it was here, she felt exposed, unworthy. "Sit," he said simply. His voice was deep, controlled, carrying the weight of a man used to being obeyed. She obeyed, perching on the edge of a leather chair, her heart pounding so hard it threatened to drown out the silence. There was no small talk, no pleasantries. Obinna reached into a drawer, pulled out a sleek digital tablet, and slid it across the desk. Her eyes widened. Displayed on the screen were her own fashion sketches, her bold lines, her imagined gowns, her futuristic reworking of Ankara and Aso-Oke. Designs she had uploaded once, years ago, to a forgotten online portfolio. She had abandoned that dream when no one responded, leaving it to gather dust in the corners of the internet. Yet here they were, glowing brightly in the hands of one of Africa's most powerful men. Her voice cracked. How did you get these?" Obinna leaned back, studying her. "I make it my business to know talent when I see it. You may not, Realize this, Miss Chukwuma, but I've been watching you. Her breath caught. Watching? I saw your boutique fail, he continued calmly. I saw your rejections pile up. And I saw you standing at my gate the other night, whispering to yourself as though the mansion was a mountain you could never climb. Adanna's throat tightened. She felt laid bare, her struggles turned inside out. She wanted to protest, to ask why he would care, but the intensity in his eyes silenced her. Then came the words she never expected. I am launching a new venture, Obinna said, his tone clipped, deliberate. A fashion tech brand rooted in African heritage but infused with the future. Smart fabrics, wearable technology, designs that tell our story and lead the world. I want you to lead it. Adanna blinked rapidly, unsure she had heard him correctly. Her, lead a brand? This was the kind of opportunity she had dreamed of, but never dared imagine. But why me? She whispered, voice trembling. Because you see what others don't, he replied. You imagine beyond limits. You have fire. His eyes narrowed slightly. But fire can burn as easily as it can shine. He folded his hands. The terms are simple. You have 6 months. Prove yourself, and the brand is yours to command. Fail, and you walk away, with nothing owed and nothing gained. Her heart pounded so loudly it hurt. 6 months to prove herself in a world she barely understood? It was madness. It was impossible. And yet, it was everything. She thought of her siblings, of her mother's cough, of the endless nights of rejection. Her entire life had been building to this moment, though she had not known it. Her lips parted. I accept. But her hands trembled as she said it, for deep inside, she knew this was not merely an opportunity. It was a test, one that would stretch her to breaking point. Obinna's gaze did not soften. His next words chilled her, cutting through the fragile hope blooming in her chest. This opportunity will test not just your talent, he said, voice low, deliberate. It will test your soul. A new door may open, but walking through it comes with fire. The first weeks inside Lumina felt less like a fresh start and more like a pressure cooker. Adanna stepped into polished meeting rooms and found herself submerged in a world where success smelled of ozone and engineered certainty. Corporate politics moved like an undercurrent. Smiles stitched with barbs, handshakes that calculated future leverage. Rival designers circled her like birds of prey. Some offered saccharine praise to her face and sharpened claws behind her back. The press, ever hungry for a spectacle, paint-bombed her with headlines, "The Billionaire's New Toy," "From ABBA to the Penthouse," "How Fast Will She Fall?" Each article felt like a match thrown toward the fragile tinder of her confidence. Obinna watched most of it from a distance that seemed deliberate. He did not intervene in meetings. He let conversations unfold, let tensions flare and burn up their own smoke. That cold reserve unnerved her. At times, she imagined he was testing her, like a coach watching an athlete falter under heat. At other moments, she feared his silence meant he had already decided she would fail. But even his quiet contained instruction, lessons in restraint, in turning pressure into precision. The challenges were real and relentless. Budgets were tight, Lumina liked efficiency, and deadlines were surgical. She was given a single season to create a line that would marry tradition with technology, ASO-OK reimagined into tailored, wind-resistant jackets for coastal cities, Ankara morphing into smart dresses that adjusted microclimates around the skin, cooling when Lagos stifled and warming during misty nights. Engineers were brusque, unfamiliar with the soft logic of textile narrative. Textile houses demanded payment, upfront she did not have. Meetings ran into late nights, and she learned the names of people who mattered by the timbre of their discontent. When machines failed or fabrics tore, her stomach clenched as if the very threads of her future were unraveling. There were moments when the doubt crept through like a draft. One evening, exhausted to bone and smelling faintly of starch and chemicals, Adanna sat on the floor of the design lab, her back against a stack of untouched fabrics. She closed her eyes and let the memory of Abba rise up, the laughter of her siblings in the courtyard, her mother's hands folding plain clothes with careful skill. the way her father had corrected a seam when she was a child and praised the curve of a stitch. Those memories were anchors. They steadied her when the industry storms threatened to capsize her resolve. She breathed them in, tasting the sweet, sour mix of determination and fear, letting that fuel push her back onto her feet. Lagos Fashion Week was the gauntlet. It was where reputations were sealed or shredded in public view, where investors watched the runway the way generals watched troop movements. Adanna worked until her fingers ached, until her designs felt less like objects and more like confessions. Garments braided with memory and future tech, seams hiding sensors, collars that glowed faintly in reaction to mood. The night before the show, her team slept in shifts on the studio floor, sewing machines whispering like tired ghosts. There were threats too, veiled calls, inconvenient accidents with fabric shipments, and the low hum of gossip. Someone had planted a story implying her textiles were copied from a boutique in Accra. She could have crumbled. Instead, she folded the doubt into something fiercer. When the runway lights flared and the crowd inhaled as one, her heart did something she had never felt. It stopped being a solitary drum and became a chorus. Cameras blinked, the music rose, and models walked in pieces that sang of riverbanks and satellite maps, of grandmothers' hands and nanofibers. The city held its breath. Investors in the front row shifted in their seats, leaning forward. The fashion critics scribbled faster, the bloggers typed in near-hysteric streams. What began as curiosity bloomed into awe. People whispered of a new aesthetic, African futurism, that did not abandon the past, but put it on rocket fuel. Back in the dim of the VIP section, Obinna watched as if from the belly of the building itself. He stood in a shadowed doorway, the glow of the runway painting the planes of his face. Something in him, long dulled by suspicion and loss, stirred and brightened. Pride threaded through his reserve, fragile but real. He noticed the way Adanna's shoulders moved when she breathed, the small, stubborn smile that crept across her face when the applause rose. For the first time in a long while, he felt more than calculation. He felt stirred, vulnerable to that soft, dangerous thing called hope. But triumph always quivers near the edge of ruin. As the applause echoed and the lights softened, a hush ran through a corner of the crowd. Like a cooled ember waiting to flare, a rival's voice slid between seats, low and venomous. But in the crowd, a rival whispers, "She doesn't belong here. She must be destroyed." Success unlocked a new door, but it wasn't business alone knocking. The weeks after Lagos Fashion Week unfolded like a dream threaded with needles of reality. Adanna's name was now whispered in the same breath as established icons. Her designs featured in glossy magazines. Her interviews streamed online. She should have been celebrating, but instead, she found herself drawn deeper into the silent orbit of the man who had given her the chance to prove herself. Obinna Umeh. At first, their interactions were purely professional. Long evenings bent over sketches and prototypes, heated debates about fabric durability versus aesthetic flow, and strategy meetings with investors who demanded numbers instead of vision. Yet, in those late hours when the city lights glittered against the glass walls of Lumina Tower, something began to shift. The conversation strayed from business into fragments of memory and confession. Obinna spoke of the solitude of power, how wealth built walls taller than mountains, how betrayal had made him wary of every handshake. His words were stripped of the polish he showed to the world. They were rougher, more human. Adanna, in turn, revealed the jagged edges of her own journey, the sting of rejection letters, the loneliness of a rented room far from family, the weight of expectations that pressed on her shoulders like lead. It was in these whispered exchanges that they began to see each other differently. Obinna admired her courage, her refusal to crumble even when the world mocked her, and Adanna, for all her initial awe of his empire, began to see beyond the tailored suits and billion-dollar valuations. Beneath the armor, he was lonely, a man, haunted by ghosts of love and trust lost too soon. One evening, after an especially grueling day of negotiations, Obinna surprised her. Instead of sending her home, he asked quietly, Do you trust me enough to leave Lagos for one night?" Her hesitation lasted only a moment. The journey took them by private jet, then by boat under the cover of twilight, until a hidden villa emerged from the sea's horizon. Built on a secluded island, the home was nothing like the sterile perfection of his mansion in Victoria Island. Here, the walls were warmer, the floors made of polished wood, and wide terraces opened directly to the ocean's restless embrace. It was here that Obinna revealed his secret. In a room filled with blueprints and half-finished models, he showed her his most personal dream, a city of the future, one designed to merge African heritage with innovation. Circular neighborhoods shaped like traditional compounds, but powered by renewable energy. Markets infused with smart infrastructure, bridges that curved like waves, connecting communities without severing nature. He confessed in a low voice that this was once his passion, his greatest project, but it had been abandoned after betrayal ripped through his trust. The city was supposed to redefine Africa's place in the world, he said, tracing a trembling finger across a blueprint. Instead, it became a reminder of what I lost. Adanna studied the sketches, awe softening her features. "Then bring it back," she whispered. "Don't let betrayal kill your dream. If the future is waiting, why should we bury it?" Something shifted in his eyes then, a flicker of life where once there had only been ashes. Their closeness in that moment was almost unbearable. The distance between them shrank, their breaths mingling, the air charged with a tension neither had expected. Their eyes lingered too long, lips drawing closer, until restraint, stubborn and heavy, pulled them apart again. They did not speak of it, but the city did. Lagos gossip blogs erupted the next morning with rumors of their secret getaway. Grainy photos, perhaps leaked by someone on the staff, showed them walking side by side on the villa terrace. Headlines screamed, "Is Adanna more than just a protege?" And "The billionaire's muse?" or "the next big scam?" Social media debated viciously, some celebrating her rise, others sneering at the idea that her success was borrowed from Obinna's wealth. Adanna read the comments in silence, her chest tightening. The whispers clawed at her confidence, planting seeds of doubt. Was this truly her success? Or had she become little more than a headline in Obinna's story? That night, she returned to her modest apartment, exhaustion layered over unease. She unlocked the door and found a package sitting quietly on her table. No sender's name, no note. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, lay her old sketchbook, the very one she had carried as a child, filled with clumsy but passionate drawings of dresses and cities she had imagined long before Lagos had taught her about rejection. She turned its pages with trembling fingers, but fear prickled her skin. How had it found its way here? Who knew her so intimately? Alone in her apartment, Adanna stared at the mysterious box. Inside was her childhood sketchbook. Who could have it, and why had they sent it now? The higher she rose, the sharper the knives became. Success had made Adanna a target. The brighter her star shone, the more shadows it cast, and in those shadows lurked enemies. Among them was Chinelo Okafor, a name that carried both glamour and venom in the Nigerian fashion world. Chinelo was no ordinary rival. She was a mogul, a woman whose empire had once ruled Lagos catwalks and spread across Johannesburg and Paris. She was sharp, elegant, and ruthless, a predator in silk heels. Years ago, she had courted Obinna's investments, hoping to merge her fashion empire with his tech vision. But Obinna had turned her down. He had cited creative differences, though everyone knew it was more than that. He had seen her hunger for control and refused to give her the keys to his empire. Chinelo never forgave him, and when Adanna appeared, a fresh face, unpolished but blazing with raw vision, endorsed by Obinna himself, Chinelo's envy curdled into fury. She saw Adanna not only as a competitor, but as a thief, a girl who had stolen her spotlight, her investors, and perhaps even the man she once believed might be hers. Her retaliation was swift and silent. Chinelo began infiltrating Adanna's fragile network, planting whispers among suppliers, sliding money into the hands of insiders. Weeks before Adanna's first international showcase in Dubai, Bolts of fabric she had ordered vanished mysteriously. Machines in her production studio failed without explanation, needles snapping, threads tangling. Her assistants discovered tampered shipments, zippers that broke mid-stitch, dyes that bled across fabric. The pressure mounted like a storm cloud. Dubai was not Lagos. It was a global stage, filled with buyers from Milan, Paris, and New York. If she failed here, she would not only lose credibility, she would lose the trust Obinna had risked by elevating her. And on the night before her showcase, Chinello's schemes nearly succeeded. Half of Adanna's designs were ruined. Gowns carefully crafted for months now looked like rags. Her team panicked, some urging her to pull out entirely. The easy choice was retreat. But Adanna was her mother's daughter, born of resilience, raised in fire. She sat alone in the Dubai hotel ballroom, surrounded by discarded fabrics, her hands trembling as tears threatened. Then, as if her childhood sketchbook had whispered across the years, she remembered Abba, remembered sewing scraps into beauty when money was scarce. Resilience, she murmured, standing. Through the night, she and a small circle of loyal assistants worked tirelessly. They scavenged discarded materials from other designers, reshaping them into something new. Silk fragments became patchwork elegance. Torn Ankara was fused with futuristic metallic threads. Every stitch was a gamble, every seam a rebellion. By dawn, the collection was not what she had planned, but it was alive. When her models walked the Dubai runway, the audience fell silent. What they saw was not perfection polished by wealth, but defiance woven into cloth. Dresses that bore scars of improvisation, but shone with spirit. Coats cut from resilience, gowns stitched with audacity. The critics leaned in. Investors widened their eyes. What began as potential disaster ended in a standing ovation. One reviewer wrote breathlessly, "Adanna Chukwuma has introduced a new language of fashion, revolutionary African resilience." From the shadows of the VIP gallery, Obinna watched. His chest swelled, not with business satisfaction alone, but with something far more dangerous. He had admired her courage in boardrooms and design studios. But tonight, watching her transform sabotage into triumph, he realized something stirring. Admiration was no longer enough. The walls around his heart, carefully built brick by brick after betrayal, began to crack. He was falling. For her courage, her fire, her stubborn refusal to break. And Chinello? She sat in the front row, lips curved in a cold smile that did not reach her eyes. She clapped slowly, deliberately, as the world crowned Adanna's triumph. But inside, her fury burned hotter than the Dubai sun. This girl had survived sabotage, had turned disaster into glory. Chinello's pride could not stomach it. "This isn't over," she hissed under her breath, her manicured nails digging into her palm. Back in Lagos, the celebration did not last long. While Adanna basked in the afterglow of her victory, a storm brewed online. Social media erupted with a headline splashed across every fashion blog and news outlet. "Who really owns Adanna's designs? Shocking documents leaked." The words glared at her from every screen, twisting her triumph into suspicion. In one night, her victory turned to doubt. Who was behind the leak? And could this destroy everything she had built? Trust, once cracked, is harder to repair than glass. The scandal came like a flood. One moment, Adanna was celebrated as the rising face of African futurism. The next, her name was dragged through the mud. The leaked documents spread across social media like wildfire, alleging that her entire Dubai collection had been stolen from a small Ghanaian boutique. Screenshots of contracts, fabricated emails, and supposed testimonies circulated faster than she could breathe. Twitter threads labeled her a fraud. Instagram flooded with memes mocking her as the billionaire's puppet. TikTok videos dissected her rise, painting it as too sudden, too suspicious. The words scam and copycat trended beside her name. Investors panicked. Calls came in from Paris, New York, Johannesburg. Sponsors backed away quietly, pretending contracts had never been signed. Invitations for international showcases vanished. She watched her calendar, once filled with promise, empty overnight. At Lumina Tower, the board grew restless. They gathered in Obinna's penthouse boardroom, their suits sharp, their words sharper. "We cannot let this scandal sink the company's reputation," one declared. Another added coldly, "She's a liability. Cut her off before her fire burns the house." Obinna sat at the head of the table, his jaw tight, his silence heavier than their accusations. He knew the board feared not just the scandal, but the whispers tying him personally to Adanna. Yet beneath their words, another war raged in his chest. He had seen her work. He had watched her labor until dawn, stitching resilience into cloth. He knew her fire was genuine. But the weight of empire pressed hard. Was his loyalty to truth or to stability? Adanna felt the distance immediately. His calls became shorter, his eyes unreadable, his presence colder. The man who had once lingered in quiet conversations now seemed wrapped in armor again. In her lowest moment, she stormed into his office, her voice shaking with fury and hurt. "Do you see me, Obinna?" she demanded, her fists trembling. "Or do you only see the risk I bring to your empire? Am I just another file on your desk?" His silence was the sharpest wound of all. He did not deny her worth, nor did he defend her. He simply stared, torn between emotion and empire, between the woman who had stirred life back into his world and the company he had sworn never to let fall again. Her heart broke in that silence. The next morning, she left a resignation letter on his desk and walked out of Lumina Tower with nothing but her sketchbook tucked under her arm. By evening, she was on a bus bound for Abba. Home greeted her with both comfort and resignation. She rented a small room above a market, its walls thin enough to hear the chaos of vendors below. With what little money she had, she took a job at a local tailoring shop. She stitched uniforms for school children, mended worn-out blouses, hemmed trousers for laborers. Customers knew her only as the quiet seamstress, never guessing she had once walked the runways of Dubai. But though her world shrank, her fire refused to die. Each night, after the market's noise dimmed, she sat at her wooden table under the dim glow of a kerosene lamp and opened her sketchbook. Her fingers traced lines onto paper, sketching gowns that shimmered in her imagination, coats that seemed made for futures not yet written. She told herself it was only habit, but she knew it was survival. Art was the only part of her she could not surrender. Days turned into weeks. The scandal faded from headlines, swallowed by new dramas, but the wound in her chest remained. She buried her ambition under fabric and thread, pretending to be ordinary. Yet, deep inside, a part of her longed for the fire she had touched, the stage she had commanded, the vision she had nearly brought to life. Then, one night, as she hunched over her sewing machine, the whir filling the silence, she felt a presence. Slowly, she lifted her head. Standing in the doorway of the dim tailoring shop, framed by the flickering light of the street, was a figure she never expected to see again. Obinna Umeh. His suit was immaculate, but his face was tired, shadowed with something that looked dangerously close to regret. Adanna froze, needle still in her hand. He had come all the way to Abba, but why? Sometimes the door you avoided comes knocking for you. For years, Obinna Umeh had lived as though he owed nothing to anyone, a fortress of pride and silence. But standing in that cramped tailoring shop in Abba, with the hum of a sewing machine still echoing, he felt stripped of all the armor he had built. His empire meant nothing in that moment. His tailored suit could not protect him from the weight of Adanna's eyes, wide and wary, filled with both hurt and disbelief. "Why are you here?" she whispered, her voice brittle. He took a slow step closer, the shop's floor creaking under his polished shoes. "Because I was wrong," he said simply. The words felt foreign on his tongue. Confession was not his nature, but he forced them out. "I should have spoken. I should have stood by you. My silence was fear, Adanna, not doubt. I was afraid of losing everything again, and in protecting my empire, I lost the one thing I never knew I needed, you." Her hands trembled on the fabric she still clutched, torn between anger and longing. She wanted to believe him, but betrayal, his silence, had carved wounds too deep. She turned away, but he followed, stepping into the narrow street where the Abba market pulsed with life. The crowd swallowed them, Traders shouting prices, women balancing baskets of fruit on their heads, children darting between stalls. The air was thick with the scent of roasted plantain and fried akara. Here, Obinna was no longer a billionaire. He was just a man, walking beside a woman he had wronged, stripped of titles and power. As they wove through the market, he spoke softly, words carried on the noise of the city. Adanna, I don't just need your talent, I need you. You remind me of what it means to dream without fear. You've given me more than designs, more than ideas. You've given me back myself. She stopped, turning to face him amid the chaos. Her eyes glistened. And what happens when fear grips you again? Will you abandon me a second time? The question sliced him open. For a moment, he had no answer. Then, he bowed his head. I can't promise I will never be afraid, he admitted. But I promise I will never let fear silence me again. The tension between them hung heavy. Adanna's heart warred within her. Love that still burned, fear that still lingered. She opened her mouth to speak, but another voice cut through. Her mother, Mama Chukwuma, wrapped in a faded wrapper, had been watching quietly from a nearby stall. She stepped forward now, her presence commanding despite her frail frame. Her eyes moved from her daughter to the man beside her. The door you fear, Mama said gently, may be the only one strong enough to hold your future. Child, you cannot spend life knocking on doors that lead nowhere. Sometimes, the right door comes knocking for you. Will you open it or run? Adanna's throat tightened. She looked at her mother, at the woman who had raised her through storms of hunger and grief, and then at Obinna, whose eyes now carried no arrogance, only naked truth. Slowly, like a fragile flower opening to the sun, she allowed herself to forgive. Her voice trembled. If I return, Obinna, it cannot just be about fashion or business. I will not be a project or a shield for your empire. He nodded, stepping closer. I don't ask you to return as my designer, he said, voice thick. I ask you to return as my partner, in life, in dreams, in building something that lasts. Her breath caught as he sank to one knee, not with a ring, not with diamonds, but with vulnerability laid bare. Around them, the market hummed, life continuing as though nothing had changed, yet for Adanna, the world tilted. Obinna looked up at her, his eyes steady. I have wealth, Adanna, but wealth without you feels empty. Marry me, not because of what we can own, but because of what we can build together. The market seemed to blur around her. She heard only his voice, saw only his face, felt only the weight of the choice before her. Her heart pounded, her lips quivered. At last she whispered, so softly only he could hear, yes, but only if we build something greater than ourselves. His breath caught at her words. What did she mean? What future did she envision that even he could not see? Their love became a national event. The announcement of their engagement rippled across Nigeria like thunder. Some cheered, others scoffed, but no one ignored it. The billionaire Obinna Umeh, long regarded as an untouchable recluse, had chosen Adanna Chukwuma, the girl from Aba who once stitched clothes in a market stall, as his bride. For high society, it was a shockwave. Half admired the audacity of love defying class divides. The other half sneered, dismissing her as a social climber, a project polished into a princess. But for the ordinary people who had followed her story, Adanna became a symbol, proof that persistence could rewrite destiny. Preparations began with a grandeur the nation had not seen in years. Luxury planners flew in from Paris and Dubai. But Adanna insisted that her roots would not be erased by wealth. Every step of the process blended modern opulence with Igbo tradition. The fabrics she selected were not merely expensive, they were stories. She designed her own outfits, merging heritage with futurism. Isiagu patterns woven into gowns that shimmered with metallic threads, veils embroidered with circuit-like motifs that glowed faintly under light. She wanted her garments to speak the language of where she came from and where she was going. The traditional rites in Aba were a festival of color and community. The village square, once quiet, pulsed with music and laughter. Drummers beat rhythms that carried for miles. Women ululated with joy, and elders poured blessings into gourds of palm wine. Children danced barefoot in the dust, their joy unfiltered. Everyone came, not just family, but neighbors, traders, school friends, and strangers who had once doubted her. They all gathered to witness the girl who had left with nothing return, with a promise of forever. Adanna moved through the ceremony radiant, adorned in coral beads and fabrics she had designed herself. Her steps were slow and graceful as she presented palm wine to Obinna, kneeling with humility, but rising with dignity. Obinna, dressed in regal Isiagu, received it with reverence, his eyes never leaving hers. In that exchange, two families, two histories, and two futures were bound together. If Aba was intimate, Lagos was spectacle. The white wedding at Victoria Island was unlike anything the nation had seen. The venue itself was a glass dome overlooking the Atlantic, its walls alive with digital projections of constellations and galaxies, an echo of their promise to build beyond themselves. Guests poured in from every corner of the globe, politicians from Abuja, tech giants from Silicon Valley, fashion moguls from Paris, Afrobeat stars, Nollywood royalty. Security was tight, the streets lined with onlookers hoping for a glimpse. Helicopters hovered above, capturing the event that the press had already dubbed the wedding of the decade. Adanna entered in a gown she had designed herself, a dress that shimmered like morning dew, layered with fabrics from Aba markets, but sculpted into a silhouette the future had not yet caught up with. The crowd gasped as she walked the aisle, her veil catching the light like liquid silver. Obinna waited at the altar, his usually stern face softened by an emotion few had ever seen in him. When it was time for vows, he spoke not like a billionaire, but like a man stripped bare. "I built towers to keep the world out," he said, his voice steady yet thick with meaning. "I believed trust was a luxury I could never afford again. But then came a woman who knocked on every door until she found the one that mattered. I did not expect her. I did not deserve her. Yet here she is, my fire, my anchor, my future. Adanna, I choose you now and every day after." Tears blurred her eyes as she placed her hand in his. Their kiss was greeted with thunderous applause, the dome alight with fireworks bursting across digital skies. Their first dance followed, set not to the rhythm of grandeur, but of intimacy. They swayed slowly, eyes locked, moving as though the world beyond them had disappeared. For the crowd, it symbolized unity, two worlds, two empires, colliding not in conquest, but in harmony. The media erupted the next day, headlines crowning it a love story for the ages. From market stalls to mansions, Adanna's rise. Obinna and Adanna, the wedding of the decade. Social feeds overflowed with clips of their vows, their kiss, their dance, but not everyone celebrated. In the far corner of the reception, concealed behind laughter and champagne, Chinelo Okafor watched. Her eyes, lined with kohl, were sharp as knives. Her lips curved into a smile that carried no joy. She raised her glass, not in toast, but in mockery, her mind already stitching the next move. Leaning close to her confidant, Chinelo whispered, "The war has just begun. Even the brightest towers attract storms. The wedding may have united two souls, but it also painted a target on their backs." For Chinelo Okafor, the vows and the lavish headlines were salt in an old wound. She had been rejected once by Obinna in business, then upstaged by Adanna in fashion. To see them now crowned as Nigeria's power couple was unbearable. And so she sharpened her knives. Chinelo reached across borders, aligning herself with foreign investors who coveted a crack in Lumina's gleaming armor. With whispered promises and carefully planted lies, she helped spread rumors of corporate fraud. Whispers became articles, and articles became storms. "Obinna's empire inflated," one headline screamed. "Lumina cooking its books," another declared. Overnight, trust began to bleed. The stock dipped. Investors hesitated. Meetings grew tense, with Obinna's executives questioning every move. The empire he had built brick by brick, with sweat and suspicion, seemed suddenly fragile. And in the midst of the storm, all eyes turned to the woman at his side, Adanna. This was where she could have retreated, choosing comfort in her new title as wife. But Adanna was no ornament. She had been forged in rejection, shaped by markets and hunger, sharpened by fire. She refused to let her husband face the storm alone. "Then let me fight too," she told him one night, her eyes fierce under the dim glow of their penthouse lights. "Not as your wife, but as your partner." And so, she launched Adanna. Backed by Obinna, but run autonomously, her brand did not merely sell clothes. It sold identity. It married heritage with futurism, building on the very resilience that had carried her through Dubai's sabotage. Adanna's collections told stories in fabric, jackets lined with proverbs, dresses coated with augmented reality, shoes embedded with energy-converting fibers. The youth across Nigeria and beyond did not just buy her designs, they wore them like declarations. Adanna became a cultural movement. Pop stars draped themselves in her jackets, activists wore her smart fabrics to rallies. University students pooled money just to afford a single accessory. Her vision gave them something bigger than fashion. It gave them pride. Obinna watched with a quiet awe that grew daily. While he rebuilt investor confidence through hard facts and transparent reforms, Adanna built something far more elusive: trust of the people. Where his empire had been shaken by rumors, hers flourished with authenticity. Together, they created a balance neither could have achieved alone. Slowly, the tide turned. Lumina's numbers stabilized, the fraud allegations revealed as hollow, and Obinna's empire steadied again. The same media that once questioned him now praised the couple as a symbol of resilience. And Chinelo? Her own empire, already straining under years of overreach, began to crack. Her reckless partnerships backfired, leaving her exposed. Designers abandoned her. Foreign investors withdrew when profits failed to match promises. Still, her pride would not let her surrender. She watched Adanna's meteoric rise and Lumina's recovery with venom in her throat. "This is not over," she spat to her remaining allies. "If I cannot destroy their names, I will destroy their foundation." Her desperation grew dangerous. One evening, as Adanna prepared for a keynote at a Pan-African fashion tech summit, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The words were simple, but they made her blood run cold. "Meet me alone, or everything you built will collapse." She froze, the hum of the city outside her window fading into silence. Whoever had sent it knew her weakness. Her empire was more than clothes. It was a movement. She could not risk its destruction. But she also knew the trap of shadows. One wrong step could cost her everything she had fought for: her brand, her love, her life as she had rebuilt it. Still, the choice pressed against her ribs like a blade. With trembling hands, Adanna stared at the message. Who had sent it, and what price would she pay if she dared to answer? Every rejection had led her here. The message had brought her into the shadows, but Adanna walked with her head high. When she entered the quiet, dimly lit conference hall where the meeting was set, she was not the trembling girl who once cowered at slammed doors. She was a woman who had stood before nations, carried storms on her shoulders, and risen. Waiting inside was Chinelo Okafor. Her once immaculate appearance had frayed. The diamonds still clung to her ears, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. Her empire had been collapsing piece by piece, yet her pride had carried her here, desperate for one final battle. "So," Chinelo began, her voice sharp but brittle, "this is the girl who stole everything from me. My spotlight, my investors, even the man who once belonged in my world." Adanna did not flinch. "I stole nothing from you," she said calmly. "I only walked through the door you ignored." For a moment, silence sat heavy between them. And then, like glass finally cracking under pressure, Chinelo broke. Her shoulders sagged, her voice trembling. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I clawed my way up from nothing. I bled to build my empire. And when I thought I had everything, Obinna turned me away. Then you appeared, fresh, young, with a face the media loved. And suddenly, I was yesterday's news." Her eyes burned with tears she refused to release. "Do you know what it feels like to be erased?" Adanna inhaled slowly. She did know the sting of erasure, the weight of invisibility, the bitterness of rejection. But she also knew the power of choice. Revenge was within her grasp, but she let it slip away. "I knocked on every door, Chinello," she said softly, her voice steady. "And every one was closed to me. Except one. That's why I'll never close it on others. Not even on you." For the first time, Chinello faltered. Her lips parted as though to retort, but no words came. Her empire had already begun to rot from the inside, not because of Adanna, but because of her own greed. With a bitter laugh that carried no joy, she turned and walked out of the hall, her heels clicking against the marble like fading echoes of a lost crown. When the door closed behind her, another opened. Obinna entered, not rushing to rescue, but arriving to stand beside the woman who had already fought her battle. His presence was steady, not overshadowing hers, but amplifying it. He placed a hand on her shoulder, silent affirmation that he saw her, respected her, trusted her. Together, they turned their backs on the ruins of Chinello's envy and faced the horizon of what they could build. From that day forward, Adanna and Obinna did not live merely as billionaires. They became nation builders. They launched foundations for women entrepreneurs, providing capital and mentorship for girls whose dreams might otherwise die at the gates of rejection. They opened schools that merged coding with cultural history, teaching children to dream in both binary and tradition. Tech hubs bloomed in forgotten towns, incubating ideas that carried Africa into the future. Their love, tested by betrayal and sharpened by storms, matured beyond luxury. It was no longer about lavish weddings or flashing headlines. It was about legacy. Nights once spent discussing profits turned into conversations about purpose. They became not just husband and wife, not just partners in empire, but architects of a vision larger than themselves. Years later, on a day when the Lagos sun gleamed against glass towers, Adanna stood before a vast crowd, her hand entwined with Obinna's. Before them rose the realization of both their dreams, Africa's first futuristic fashion tech city. It was a marvel of design and innovation. Buildings curved like woven fabrics, streets pulsed with solar power, and markets blended heritage with AI-driven commerce. Fashion houses doubled as laboratories, where tailors stitched tradition into technology. At the heart of it stood Adanna headquarters, a structure shaped like a loom, its glass walls catching the sun as though weaving light itself. The crowd erupted in applause as Adanna lifted the microphone. Her voice was steady, her smile luminous. "Every door I knocked on was closed to me," she said. "I thought rejection meant failure, but now I know. Every closed door was preparing me for the one I never dared to knock. And when it opened, it changed not just my life, but the lives of so many others." Beside her, Obinna's hand tightened around hers. Pride and love etched across his face. The final scene closed with them cutting the ribbon to unveil the city, their legacy shining under the Lagos sun. Their story was no longer just about love or empire. It was about creating a future where no dream would be locked away behind closed doors again. If this story moved you, don't just leave. Be part of this journey. Subscribe now, share this video, and let's keep bringing powerful stories to life together.